adjourned. First of all, have a good lunch. Thank you. Thank the mayor. You thank me when I sing the deal, okay? I'm just looking. Lunch is on me, okay? Yeah. Mr. Christmas, okay? I got 4 calls, please.
Commonwealth of Virginia versus Stephen Rankin. Is the Commonwealth ready?
Commonwealth ready.
Is the defense ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Counsel?
Special Agent Garrett Gista. Garrett Gista. Special Agent Garrett Gista.
Solemnly swear or affirm testimony you give in the case to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Please state your name and occupation for the court.
Garrett Justo, Special Agent with the Virginia State Police.
And were you employed in that capacity on April 22nd of 2015?
Yes, I was.
On that day, did you have occasion to respond to 1098 Frederick Boulevard here in the city of Portsmouth?
Yes, I did.
What brought you to respond to that location on that day?
I was advised to respond for a police-involved shooting that occurred in the parking lot of the Wal-Mart.
All right. And when you responded to the scene, what were your duties on that day?
Initially, when I responded, I was advised just to walk the scene and get an idea of what was going on at the scene. I arrived shortly before 9 a.m. I was only there about 20 minutes, and then I was advised to exit the scene, leave the scene, and the 307
County Street?
County Street, thank you. 307 County Street to make contact with Mr. Rankin.
All right, and tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury where 307 County Street is or what it is.
It's one of the Portsmouth Police Department's office buildings
All right.
in the city of Portsmouth.
Okay, and so you responded to that location after being at Wal-Mart for approximately 20 minutes or so.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you collect any evidence at the scene at Wal-Mart?
No, I did not.
Okay, and so once you responded to 307 County Street, tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what you did at that point.
I entered the building, I made contact with Mr. Rankin, took several photographs of the condition that his clothing and his duty gear was in when I arrived on scene. After that, I acquired several items of evidence for Mr. Rankin.
All right. What items of evidence did you acquire from the defendant?
I received his duty weapon, also to include the magazine and rounds in his duty weapon. There's 2 extra magazines to include the duty rounds in those magazines. Key fob that was on his duty belt. His OC spray, or pepper spray container, and the pouch that it was in. I also received from him...
Hold on, let me stop you 1 second. So you indicated that you retrieved the OC spray,
Yes.
the container, and the pouch it was in.
Yeah.
So those are all, it's 2 things?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it's the spray itself and then the container that it's in. Okay, and you can finish, please.
All right. His duty pants and also his duty shirt.
And shirt?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, do you have all those items here with you in the courtroom today?
I do.
All right. Your Honor, may I approach? Thank you. So I know it may take a little bit of time, but let's start to get these out one
Yes,
by
ma'am.
one. You indicated you obtained his duty weapon?
Yes, ma'am. As listed as item number 3.
Okay. That state police, state police item number three.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you have secured this item?
Yes,
There's
ma'am.
obviously no ammunition or anything of that nature?
That's
in this
correct.
item?
It is safe.
Hold on. I'll see it off. I'll write that check.
Yes, Your Honor. And while the deputy is checking, once again, this is an item that the Commonwealth and the defense had previously stipulated to the chain of custody. Is here, Your Honor, are there any issues with the chain of custody with respect to the item?
No, ma'am.
Or any of the other items that you have?
No, ma'am.
So noted.
Your Honor, done. At this time, Your Honor, Commonwealth would move to admit this item into evidence as Commonwealth Exhibit number 22.
No objection.
So proceed.
May I approach the clerk? All right, Special Agent, I believe the next item you indicated you had was the magazine.
Yes. There's also one item I forgot to mention.
Okay, what item?
The Motorola radio.
All right, you have it as well?
Yes, ma'am. This is item number, State Police item number 27, which is the magazine that was inside the weapon and the rounds that were in there as well.
Magazine and the weapon.
It's a single magazine. That was
Single magazine.
One in the weapon.
The one in the weapon.
Yes, ma'am.
Move to admit Commonwealth Exhibit number 23.
No objection.
So proceed.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
What's the next item?
Item, State Police item number 26 are the two magazines from Mr. Rankin's magazine pouch,
Okay.
in addition to the 30 rounds of ammunition in those two magazines.
Move to admit Commonwealth Exhibit number 24.
No
So
objection.
proceed.
If you just describe the next item, you don't have to give the Virginia State Police number,
Yes,
but
ma'am.
what item is it?
Next item is item number 4, which is the leather holder with the OC spring in it.
All right, so this contains both of those
Yes,
items,
ma'am.
correct? All right, so inside there's OC spray and it's contained.
Yes, ma'am. It's a leather pouch at 16.
This 25. And Your Honor, we would move to admit these two items collectively as Commonwealth Exhibit number 25.
Counsel.
No objection.
So proceed.
So I believe it would be 25A and B.
Now we get to the back of the open.
Okay.
Item number 24 is the Motorola radio.
All right. That's the new thing we made before.
Yes, ma'am.
No objection.
Move to admit Commonwealth Exhibit number 26.
So proceed.
And
And item number 25 is the key fob with the key fob that was in the duty vest.
okay. And does this indicate that it could possibly contain blood?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. This is the key fob.
No objection, Your Honor.
Move to admit Commonwealth Exhibit number 27.
So proceed.
And his duty pants and shirt are outside the door. I think it's in the car can grab them. They're not in this box.
Do you have anything else that's on the list that you discussed?
No.
Okay. Your Honor, may I retrieve Commonwealth Exhibit number 25 of the clerk?
You may. You said it was a box.
Yes, sir.
Just sit it down.
Yes, sir.
Or ask you to open this? ready to comply?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and you indicated that this is what you retrieved from the defendant on that day?
Yes, ma'am.
At 307 County Street?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this is the OC spray and the pouch?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Yes, ma'am.
The only other items that were on the duty belt were handcuffs. Was there a taser case?
I believe there was a taser case,
Okay, to your knowledge, there was no asp or baton?
not that I recall.
Okay, may I approach the clerk, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Special Agent, after you met with the defendant at 307 County Street and obtained all of these items of evidence, is there anything else that you did in your investigation on that day?
After that, I proceeded to the medical examiner's office to observe autopsy.
Okay, and that's the victim in this case, Mr. William Chapman?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and so that was the end of your contact with the defendant in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
At any point did you return to the crime scene?
After the autopsy, I did return.
Okay, and what, if anything, did you do once you returned to the crime scene on that day?
Just spoke with other agents regarding the evidence that was collected
Okay.
while I was going.
And at some later date, you had occasion to interview several witnesses, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Please answer any questions the defense or the court may have for you at this time.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
May I? Afternoon, sir. With respect to your time at the scene at the Wal-Mart, did you interview witnesses at the Wal-Mart?
Not prior to leaving to go speak with Mr. Rankin.
Okay, did you return to the Wal-Mart later that day to interview witnesses?
Yes, there was one individual I interviewed.
Okay. At some point, in terms of this Wal-Mart, do you recall there was a Wawa that was under construction?
Yes, sir.
And that was, depends on which way you're looking at, either to the right, if you're looking out towards Frederick Boulevard, it's to the right of where the...
That's correct, sir.
Okay. Did you have an opportunity to interview anyone that was associated with that Wawa or building that Wawa?
I did, but not on scene. I did it over the phone at a later date.
Okay. Do you recall how much later that would have been?
Not without looking, I can't give you a specific time, probably a few weeks later.
Okay. Had you received their information, though, close in time to the April 22nd date, in terms of their identifying information?
Yes.
All right, in order to be able to contact them?
Yes, sir.
With respect to the, you had talked about the defendant's weapon that you had recovered from him. That was recovered at the Portsmouth Police Station?
Yeah, one of their offices. Yes,
And
sir.
that was later that day?
Yes, sir. About 9:30, between 9:30 10 o'clock.
Okay, two and a half hours later. The defendant was in possession of the weapon for that entire period of time?
As far as I know, yes.
Until the time that you asked and received it from him?
Yes, sir.
Right. And when you observed that weapon, did there appear to be any disturbances to it, differences to it, marks to it, anything of any consequence?
Not that I noticed.
Did it appear that the defendant had, Mr. Rankin, tried to alter or change it in any way before you had received it?
Not that I noticed.
The cartridges what type of gun is it?
Honestly, off the top of my head, I do not know. I don't say it might be correct.
All right. It's semi-automatic?
Yes, sir.
And can you describe for the jury how a semi-automatic fires and how it expels a cartridge?
Depends if it's double action or single action. You pull the trigger, bullet fires out, and the shell casing is ejected out of the side port on the weapon.
Right, and typically ejects to the right-hand side of the
Yes,
weapon?
sir.
Correct. And there's really no telling how far that casing can be expelled?
Not by me, no.
All right, I mean, it can bounce on the ground, it can roll, it can be kicked, it's a mobile, it's a small little thing,
Yes, sir.
and it can be easily moved about.
Yes, sir.
So generally speaking, where it necessarily is recovered is not necessarily where it was ejected.
Yes, sir.
In the magazines that you recovered from the defendant, I think from Mr. Rankin, 3 of them?
Yes, sir.
They were all standard magazines?
Yes, sir.
Nothing unusual or about them that you had observed?
No, sir, not that I know.
Did you ever have the opportunity to look inside Mr. Rankin's patrol car?
I did not do that, no.
Was there a baton or an asp that was ever turned over to you at a later point?
No, sir.
May I just have one moment, Your Honor? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That was-
Thank you, sir.
All right, so we discussed a couple of items that you hadn't brought into the courtroom, and those were the pants that the defendant was wearing and the shirt, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is there any other ballistic evidence that you ended up recovering in this case that we haven't already submitted into evidence?
Yes, ma'am, it came from the medical examiner's office.
And what were those items?
There were 2 shell casings, 2 bullets recovered from the victim, T-shirt that the victim was wearing, and a sweatshirt that the victim was wearing.
And you recovered those from the autopsy, you said?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and where did the shell casings, the bullets that you just mentioned, where did they come from?
The shell casings were not collected by me, but they came from the scene. The bullets came from the autopsy.
Okay.
Inside the victim, they were removed by the medical examiner.
Okay, so they came from inside his body?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, may I approach, Your Honor? Thank you.
You can lay down and get your bottle back, buddy.
Thanks.
And you only have the shell casings and the bullets in the courtroom, correct?
I do have the shirt and the
You do have
sweatshirt
the
as well.
shirt,
Yes.
sweatshirt as well, but
Yes.
you would need to retrieve the other items.
Yes, the 2 other items.
What items?
This is item number 17, a cartridge case.
Where was this recovered from?
This was recovered from the scene
From the scene?
at the Wal-Mart.
At Walmart?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, what is that?
This is a cartridge case recovered from the scene at Walmart?
No objection, Your Honor.
I'm losing track of the number. Move to admitted Commonwealth number 27, 28.
So, Chief.
This is item number 18, this is a cartridge case recovered from the Walmart, or the Wal-Mart.
Okay.
No objection.
Move to admitted Commonwealth number 29.
Counsel.
No objection, Your Honor.
So, Chief.
Thank you, ma'am.
Think you want to get 2 or 3 at a time?
I know.
So keep
I'm
on.
getting my exercise. All right.
You can do that, you can do that later.
Yes, sir.
Item number 34 is a bullet recovered from the autopsy from the victim.
Do you know where this bullet was recovered from during the autopsy?
I'd have to review Paul Compton's report, or the medical examiner's report, actually. to
Okay.
know where the bullet was from.
But this does have a state police item number assigned to it?
Yes.
Okay, this is state police item number 34?
Yes, ma'am.
And what's the next one?
And
The
item,
bullet?
yes, item number 35 is a bullet from the autopsy.
And you don't, once again, you don't know where this came from?
No, ma'am.
Okay, what else do you have?
Item number 40, which is a T-shirt with red stain on it belonging to the victim, William Chapman.
T-shirt?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you also have a sweatshirt, right?
Yes, ma'am. That's item number 41, which is a sweatshirt with a red stain belonging to the victim, William Chapman.
Okay.
No objection to either of any of these, Your Honor.
I'll move to admit the first bullet is Commonwealth Exhibit number 30. Second bullet is Commonwealth Exhibit number 31.
So, Chief.
Second bullet. Move to admit the T-shirt is Commonwealth Exhibit number 32.
So,
And
Chief.
the sweatshirt is Commonwealth Exhibit number 33.
So, Chief.
And Mr. Gisto, at this time, I would ask you to retrieve the pants and the shirt. I understand they're not in the courtroom.
Where are you? Outside?
Just outside in the
You
room.
may step down and get it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
May I approach her?
May I approach the witness, sir? Thank you, sir.
Item number 22, the utility pants recovered from Mr. Rankin.
And I'll
And
discuss
item 23 is his shirt.
his shirt.
Yes, ma'am.
No objection to these, Your Honor?
Move so that the pants is come with exhibit number 33, and the shirt is come with exhibit number 34.
So,
May I approach the clerk?
you may. Call the right hand from Madam Clerk.
34 for the pants, 35 for the shirt.
32.
Thank you.
And is there anything else that you would have recovered at the scene or either at 307 County Street that we have not already discussed?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Key. So please answer any questions defense or court may have.
Thank you, sir.
You may stand, ma'am.
Thank you.
Next witness.
Tamisha Slaughter, Your Honor. What's the first time name?
Tamisha?
Step this way, ma'am, please.
Solemnly swear or affirm testimony you give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Yes.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Would you please introduce yourself to everybody?
My name is Tamisha Slaughter. I'm William's sister.
You mentioned William. Is that William Chapman?
Yes,
And how old are you today, ma'am?
I live with me.
Okay. Judge, may I approach the witness?
You may.
And I'm going to show you two photos. First, I want to ask you if you recognize the person who is in this photo.
Yes,
Who is that?
it's me.
Yeah, give us a petition. Let's do it.
Who did you say that was, ma'am?
Yes, William.
No, I want to show you one more photo and ask you if you can identify the person who's shown in that photo.
Yes, William.
The judge often these photos as commonly 36 and 37.
Judge, we don't object to 36, we do object to 37. We've already stipulated. Sorry?
Yeah, go ahead. Now, we'll take this recorder. Can you all hear me? Can't hear.
show this one to you and have you identify what's been entered as Commonwealth State. Do you recognize the person in that photo?
That's it.
He was,
That's William Chapman.
Council, the picture that you want to have in the list, that we'll agree to.
yes, sir.
Now, you had two pictures, right?
Right.
And one allowed me in. Yeah. Okay. One of that. Okay. All right.
May I reapproach with Commonwealth 8? Thank you, ma'am. I don't have any more questions for you.
No, sir, thank you.
Diane, give me a second. Can she remain in the courtroom? We have to call her to remain in the courtroom.
No, sir.
So she can stay in the courtroom. Next witness.
Dr. Wendy Gunther.
No, she had asked me.
Oh.
solemnly swear or affirm testimony in this case to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Would you introduce yourself to the jury, please?
I'm Dr. Wendy Gunther, the medical examiner. I'm a forensic pathologist who does autopsies for the state.
And where are you located out of, ma'am?
The morgue is in Norfolk, but it covers all of the Tidewater region.
And how long have you been a medical examiner for the Tidewater region?
14 years.
Ma'am, what academic degrees do you have?
Well, I am a doctor, but it's been a long time since I took care of anyone living. I'm board certified in anatomic pathology, clinical pathology, forensic pathology, and pediatric pathology. And I've lost count of how many autopsies I've done, but the number's between 4,000 and 5,000.
And ma'am, you stated you've been practicing as a forensic pathologist for 14 years?
14 years in Tidewater, but I've been practicing as a forensic pathologist since 1994.
Okay. And so, as a forensic pathologist, your basic duties are to perform autopsies?
Judge, we're well aware, very familiar with Dr. Gunther, would stipulate her qualifications as a forensic pathologist.
I'd offer her as a forensic expert in forensic pathology and in determination of causes of death, Judge. Ma'am, I want to direct your attention to April 22nd, 2015. Do you recall performing an autopsy on an individual identified to you later as William Chapman on that day?
I do.
And ma'am, how did William Chapman initially present to you on April 22nd, 2015?
May I make reference to my notes?
Yes, if you don't recall.
Although I do remember the autopsy, there's been so many since then that I get the details mixed up, and everything I really requested for it more. Mr. Chapman was brought to me as unidentified black male Frederick Boulevard. He was lying fixed up in the body bag with his hands cupped behind his back. His hands were protected, trace evidence on his hands was protected by plastic bags that had been sealed around his wrists. He had blood across his face and his clothing. He was dressed in a zippered sweatshirt, a multicolored t-shirt, jeans, underwear, pants, socks, and shoes. And in that condition, he measured about 5'8" and weighed 187 pounds.
And so you had a chance to observe Mr. Chapman's clothing when the body bag was first opened?
I did.
Did you observe any evidence of close-range gunfire on his clothing at that time?
I did not, bearing in mind that visual examination is quite limited.
Judge, may I approach the witness?
And I'm showing you a photo. Can you tell me what is in that photo?
This is a photograph of the tab which the police or the funeral home places on the body bag to help us know the name of the person we're receiving, and it calls the person inside unidentified black male.
And was that person later identified with a specific name to you?
Yes.
When would that have been?
I think identification was accomplished either later that day or the next day by fingerprint.
Now, going all the way to the end, did you have an occasion to produce a final autopsy report in the case?
I did.
Showing you a document, asking you if you can identify that, please.
Now, this is a copy of my autopsy report, but let me just check to make sure all the pages are here. Page 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the pages with words on them. Now the diagram pages. 5, 6, 7, and 8. Yes,
Is that a true and accurate copy of your autopsy report?
it is.
Judge, I'd offer the photo and the autopsy report is almost 37 and 38.
Proceed, counsel.
Yeah, approach, Your Honor. Thank you. Ma'am, I want to direct you to your general external examination that you did on Mr. Chapman. Can you briefly tell the jury what your findings were?
Yes, I can. I started looking at the decedent's body at 2:40 on Wednesday, April 22. I don't usually start that late in the day because my techs work from 7 to 4, and I don't want them working late. But we started because we wanted to know who he was.
2:40 p.m.
2:40 p.m., sir. At that time, I said he was a normally developed, non-obese, muscular adult man with his wrists cupped together behind his back and with dense blood smeared across his face and upper chest. I photographed his hands with the handcuffs still on, and the special agent used that he was there, produced the handcuff key, and we unlocked the cuffs, and I received the cuffs to him so that we could take his hands out from behind his back. We took the bags off of his hands and wrists, and we did fingerprints so that we would be able to get a definitive identification. At that point, I noticed that there was dried blood on his face and 3 or 4 dried scrape marks on his forehead, and that he was beginning to show skin slip. Skin slip is something that happens after you're dead, when your skin starts to break down. Even a gentle touch will make a piece of it slide off. So in my photographs of him, there are odd little spots where the skin has slid off. And that may take days to happen if you're kept in a refrigerated morgue at a hospital, but it can happen very fast in the heat. So skin slip just tells me that he was outside in the heat for a while before he came to my refrigerated morgue. Other than that, I could see that he'd been shot once in the face and once in the chest. I then deferred the rest of the exam to the next morning.
And would that have been the extent of your general external examination then, Dr. Gunter?
Yes, I made some physician's descriptions of what kind of other post-mortem artifact there was. You know, your eye, the whites of your eyes start to turn dark red after you've been dead for a while. I mentioned all of that kind of thing, but I'm not reciting every word to you.
Sure. And ma'am, I just wanted to take you back through a couple things you mentioned during your description of your general external examination. You stated that Mr. Chapman presented to you as a normally developed, non-obese, muscular adult man. Is that correct?
It is.
And what do you mean by muscular?
I mean, I can see his muscles. I don't mean he's a bodybuilder.
Okay. And what was your overall impression of Mr. Chapman's size?
I thought he was pretty skinny.
And did you have occasion, or one of your assistants have occasion, to take overall photos of Mr. Chapman?
Yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor? Judge, may I approach and retrieve the autopsy report? Thank you. I want to show you two photos and ask if they accurately reflect the overall view you had of Mr. Chapman when you initially began the autopsy.
They do.
Okay. One shows his head and upper torso, one shows his legs.
They do.
Okay. And you had mentioned that his hands were covered in evidence bags, I believe. I'll show you these photos and ask if those accurately depict the condition of his hands in the evidence bags.
They do accurately depict the hands in the evidence bags after the cuffs came off.
Okay, after the fact. So initially, let me show you this photo then. Have you describe what that photo shows?
This is a photograph of his hands cuffed behind his back with the evidence bags partially removed so that we can look at his hands.
And now I noticed that in all of these photos, there's a ruler with the notation T228-15 on it. Can you tell the jury what that is?
That's our autopsy number. In Tidewater, we start every year with 001, and we keep going. This was the 223rd autopsy we did in 2015.
And then back to the handcuffs. Does this show the handcuffs after they're off Mr. Chapman's hands?
It does.
And you mentioned there was a dense blood smear on Mr. Chapman's face. Does this photo accurately show that blood smear?
It does.
Judge, I would offer you the Commonwealth's next exhibits.
We have objections to some of them, and we address?
Yeah, come on.
And Judge, I would renew my motion to introduce these photos as Commonwealth's next exhibits. May I approach?
Your objection was passed, maybe.
Yes, sir.
Don't remember that. You asking now, you asking all of these photos?
Yes, Judge. Judge, they were to be offered sequentially.
Tell me what you remember. Then you said, then you want. 39. 39 through 45.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I inquire? Now, ma'am, you also mentioned during your general external examination you found 3 to 4 dried bloodless abrasions on the forehead,
Yes.
and you also mentioned you saw a skin slip.
I did.
Okay, may I approach the witness, Your Honor? I'm going to show you 2 photos, ma'am, and ask you if these reflect first the dried bloodless abrasions on the forehead,
They do.
and second the skin slip.
It does.
First, talking about the dried bloodless abrasions, did you document those on the injury sheet in your autopsy report?
I did.
And for the skin slip, did you document that on a non-injury sheet?
I think I documented it on a non-injury sheet. Let me take a look. There were a bunch of different areas of skin slip, above his eye, across the back of one elbow. I don't remember them all right now.
But they are documented.
Yes, they are documented on the diagram.
Judge, I'd offer these 2 photos in Commonwealth's 46 and 47.
No objection.
Photo sheet.
May I approach?
You may.
And Dr. Gunther, based upon the appearance of those dried abrasions on the victim's forehead, are you able to say with certainty when they occurred?
No.
As a hypothetical, could injuries of that type have been caused by having one's head slammed onto the hood of a car?
They could.
Now, ma'am, you also identified and photographed a right nostril gunshot wound, is that correct?
I think it's the left nostril.
I apologize, left nostril gunshot wound.
I did.
Did you observe any gunshot residue around that wound?
I did not.
Did you document that wound on one of your injury sheets?
I did.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor? And does that accurately show the location of the left nostril gunshot wound after it had been cleaned?
It does.
It is offered. This is Commonwealth next.
Counsel.
No objection.
So proceed.
May I approach? Now, I noticed in reading your autopsy report that after you documented the nostril gunshot wound, the autopsy carried over to the next day. Would that be accurate?
It did.
Okay, and what was the reason for that again?
I wanted my text to go home at the normal time.
Okay. And I want to then direct your attention to your examination of a chest gunshot wound. Was that done after the victim was undressed?
Yes.
Okay. Judge, I may have just a moment, I apologize. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
I want to show you two photos and ask you if they depict holes associated with the chest gunshot wound.
Yes, at least one of them depicts a hole associated with the chest gunshot wound, the one near the letter, and I'm not certain about the other. These are both as-is photographs.
Okay. So the photo in the left one with the sweatshirt and the number depicts a hole associated with the chest gunshot wound?
Yes, but I think the other one depicts just a hole in the hood, and I'm not sure. It is, I don't think it's associated with the chest gunshot wound.
Yes, sir. Give it up for this photo is Commonwealth's next.
No objection.
So proceed.
May I approach?
You may.
Did you have occasion to clean and photograph the chest gunshot wound?
Yes.
Did you observe any gunshot residue around the wound in the chest before you cleaned it?
No, I did not.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor? Actually, you can identify the first photo I'll show to you. What's the picture of that photo?
This is an uncleaned photograph of the gunshot wound. You know, we always start with as-is photos in case we're photographing evidence that we're not seeing, and then we clean it up. This is an as-is photograph of the chest gunshot wound.
And ask you if you can see both gunshots depicted in that photograph.
Yes, in this photograph you can see both gunshots, the one in the nose, the one in the chest, scrape marks on the head, and an area of skin slip.
Put that up, and this is Commonwealth next.
No objection.
So proceed.
Yeah, I approach.
You may. Madam Clerk, what are the numbers?
May I have just a moment, Your Honor? Judge, may I approach and retrieve Commonwealth's 30 and 31? Dr. Gunther, did you recover any bullets from the body during your autopsy?
I did.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor? With Commonwealths 30 and 31. I'm going to open up first Commonwealths 30 and ask you to identify it.
This is the bullet that I took out of William Chapman's body. I wrote bullet from neck. This is the bullet that went in the left nostril and stopped on the right side of his neck. It says so in my handwriting with my signature.
Next, Commonwealths 31. You can identify that.
This is the bullet that I took from William Chapman's body that went in his chest. I called it bullet from back because I found it inside of his back.
And then I want to briefly talk to you about the path those gunshots would have taken into William Chapman's body. Yes, Judge. Oh, I apologize. Dr. Gunther, I believe you labeled gunshot number 1 as the gunshot of the face.
I did, but I made a special caution in the autopsy report. Don't think that this one hit first. I've got to call it something 1 and something 2, but I don't know which one hit first.
Yes. So without assuming that gunshot 1 of the face was first, could you tell the jury the general path that bullet would have taken through William Chapman's body?
Yes. This bullet went in his nostril. I guess you would call it the wing of the nostril. Right through the wing, through the inside of his nose, broke the upper jawbone, the maxilla we'd call it, the bone that the jaw and the cheek share together, passed through the very back of his mouth, back of his throat, going in and out of the lining of the throat, went deeper, broke off a couple of small branches of the carotid artery and ended up underneath his ear on the right side, behind his jaw.
Dr. Gunther, what effect would that gunshot have on one person?
I don't always know exactly what effect a gunshot wound would have because my patients don't talk to me, but I'll tell you this, there was a fair amount of bleeding. There would have been a fair amount of bleeding coming out of his mouth. And there was also some injury to the spinal cord, even though the bullet never went anywhere near the spinal cord. What the bullet did is it broke off a little piece of bone from the lateral part of the spine. So our nut was passing within an inch of the spinal cord, and there was some blood on the cord. And this may mean that the spinal cord was included in the blast wave that a bullet creates as it goes through you, which would probably have produced some degree of paralysis. But I don't know exactly what degree.
No, ma'am, I want to direct your attention to what you labeled as gunshot wound number 2 of the chest, assuming, of course, you can't tell what order the gunshots came in. What effect would gunshot wound number 2 of the chest... Well, actually, let me back up. Can you tell the jury what the path that gunshot wound number 2 to the chest was?
Yes. This bullet goes into his central chest, a little bit to the left of midline, and it goes through a rib and then through his heart, right through his heart and his lung. And then it goes through his spine, and this one actually cuts his spinal cord. It cuts it much lower down, but it actually does cut his spinal cord. And then it ends up underneath the skin of his back, which is where I found it.
Ma'am, redirecting you briefly to gunshot wound number 1 of the face and neck. If a person received just that gunshot, would they be able to survive or offer any resistance?
I expect they might be able to survive. That's always a tough question. I don't think it's necessarily a fatal gunshot wound if a person immediately gets the best medical care. But if somebody told me the person died anyway, I wouldn't be terribly surprised. I don't know whether the person could offer any resistance because I don't know what degree there was paralysis.
I'll ask you the same question with regard to gunshot wound number 2 of the chest. If a person received just that gunshot, would they be able to survive or offer any resistance?
This gunshot wound would have 2 main effects. Number 1, it goes right through the spinal cord, so from the moment it went through, his legs don't work. And there might be even greater degrees of paralysis than just the legs because you can go into spinal shock when your spinal cord is divided by a bullet. The other thing is this bullet goes through his heart. So that means he has just a few seconds of consciousness, after which he has a couple of minutes of unconscious life and then death. Because when a bullet goes through your heart, you bleed to death internally.
And ma'am, during your examination of William Chapman, at any time did you observe signs of close-range gunfire?
I did not.
Were you able to determine William Chapman's cause of death to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
I was.
And what was that?
Gunshot wounds of face and chest.
Thank you, ma'am. Please answer any questions of Mr. Broccoletti or the court. One, Mr. Blake. May I approach with the exhibits, Judge?
All right, counsel.
Good afternoon, Dr. Gunn.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, sir. Doctor, with respect to the report of autopsy that you filed, again, you've talked about the age of Mr. Chapman being 18, correct?
Yes,
You've talked about his height being 5'8".
yes,
You've talked about his weight being 187 pounds.
yes,
You've talked about how he's a normally developed, non-obese, muscular adult man.
yes,
You've said that the decedent is seen to have an appearance older than the stated age.
yes,
So he looked older than 18 to you.
he did.
Right. You also have described the history in your autopsy report, correct?
Yes,
And your history says shot by a police officer in a Wal-Mart parking lot after an altercation.
yes,
Okay. And that's based upon the information that you derive from the police or from the people that are present at the autopsy.
that's right.
You had talked about 3 to 4 dried, excuse me, it's getting late, I apologize. Almost 4, like your text, it's quitting time. 3 to 4 dried bloodless abrasions, okay?
Beforehand.
All right, and counsel asked you whether or not they could be hypothetically as a result of the hood of a car.
They could,
They could also be hypothetically the result of falling on the pavement.
they could,
And if it were hypothetically described to you that the decedent were shot while in a standing position and then fell to the pavement, striking his head, those abrasions could be consistent with that factual hypothetical.
they could.
Because you can't tell us when, where, how those abrasions occurred.
That's right.
All right. With respect to, counsel also asked you about stippling or fouling. And could you describe what those terms mean to the jury, please?
I was never actually asked about stippling or fouling, but I would be happy to describe what those terms mean.
I'm sorry, you asked about gunshot residue. I apologize.
When a person fires a gun, the bullet comes out of it accompanied by gunpowder and hot air. The hot air only matters when the gun is pressed into a person's skin, which I see very often when I autopsy a gunshot wound suicide. And that gives you a hard contact gunshot wound, and I know that these are not hard contact, because that is a characteristic appearance I won't go into here. If a gun goes off close to a person, but not pressed into the skin, the hot gas doesn't matter at all. But I might see gunpowder that lands on the skin. If I see gunpowder, I know that the gun went off fairly close by. There's two kinds of gunpowder. There's burned up gunpowder and gunpowder that didn't burn up. We call burned up gunpowder fouling because it's the same thing a gun owner cleans out of a fouled gun. It's basically carbon. It's tiny little black particles. When I was a kid, I used to put my hand above a burning candle and let the smoke gather on my palm, and it would turn black. It's that kind of particles. I almost never see fouling because the gun's got to be really close up for it to be there. And it wipes away at a touch, so often if a lot of blood comes out around the wound, it disappears. I don't see it very often, but if I see it, I know that gun was close. How close? The best I can do is say inches, a couple of inches. To answer that precisely, you'd have to have ballistics testing, which I don't do. I'm giving a general impression based on looking at a dead body. If the gun goes off a little bit farther away, say 6 to 12 inches, when you fire a gun, if it was perfect, all the gunpowder would burn up, and all the gunpowder would turn into propellant to propel that bullet out of the gun. But guns aren't perfect. There's always a few tiny fragments of gunpowder that didn't burn, and they fly out of the muzzle with the bullet. and are actually going so fast that they will bury underneath the transparent outer layer of a person's skin and tattoo the skin with gunpowder. We call that stippling. We like stippling because stippling doesn't wipe off. If I see stippling on a person's skin, I know that that gun went off within a few inches, but probably farther away than fouling. Problem is, as the gun backs up to 1 foot, maybe 2 feet, who knows, the stippling stops coming out with enough power to penetrate the skin. So once you get far enough away that the gunpowder doesn't penetrate the skin, I don't really know how far off the gun is. For some guns, that's as little as a foot. For some guns, it's as little as 2 feet. If I shot you from 2.5 feet away, you wouldn't like it if it was described as a distant gunshot wound, but I would have to call it a distant gunshot wound because I can't tell 2.5 feet from 20 feet. All I can say is I don't see any gunpowder. The other problem is gunpowder can land on your clothes, and if your clothes get completely covered with blood, I may not be able to see it. So when I say, yes, I didn't see gunpowder on the skin or I didn't see gunpowder on the clothes, I didn't see it with my naked eye, which is not the world's best test. The best I can tell you is I don't see any signs that this was a close-range shot, and I don't even know how close a close-range shot would have been, maybe 2 feet.
And you indicated in your report there is no evidence of close-range fire to visual inspection.
That's my visual inspection. That's
Correct.
my eyeballs looking at the body.
And that's of the gunshot wound to the skin as well as your visual inspection of the clothing.
That's right.
And in fact, you have deferred to the Department of Forensic Science for more definitive testing.
That's right.
Because they have a better instrument to test that than the visual inspection of one's eyes.
That's right.
And that's kind of what they do.
Right.
All right. Now, so in this particular case, you're aware that the clothing that Mr. Chapman was wearing eventually was submitted to the Department of Forensic Science for testing.
Yes.
And that's standard.
It's certainly standard on police shootings.
Okay. You had talked about the direction of fire, and I think that you had mentioned it was left to right, front to back, level, or slightly downward.
That's in my autopsy report. I don't think I specified that, but that's
Okay.
absolutely right.
Right. That does not necessarily tell you, I mean, you have to know the position of the parties, the position of the gun. There are many variables that enter into that particular equation.
Right. When I look at the track of a bullet from a man's left nostril to behind his right jaw, I don't know if he was standing facing the other person at the moment the gun went off. He could have been lying on the ground face up and the person could have been standing over him. Right? I know that the muzzle of the gun, the hole in his nostril, and the bullet were in a straight line. But because I don't know where the muzzle of the gun was, I don't know where that straight line was. So all I can tell you is where it went through him in respect to his own body. It's going from his left to his right. It's going from his front to his back, and slightly downward from below the top of his head. But that doesn't mean I know where he was when the gun went off.
With respect to the two shots, you've already told us there's no way for you to determine which shot came first.
No way.
And also, is it consistent with the medical evidence that you reviewed that these two shots occurred close in time to each other?
I'm not sure what you mean by medical evidence
Okay.
and review.
In terms of the autopsy that you
Oh,
performed?
my autopsy findings. Right, they certainly could have been close together in time.
All right, there's no indication from your autopsy findings that a shot occurred and then a few minutes passed by and another shot occurred?
There probably wouldn't be any indication at autopsy. If a person is nearly dead when you shoot again, there might be a bloodless trail. But I really can't tell if there's half a second, 1 second, 2 seconds, 20 seconds. Autopsy is just not, that's just not a scientific finding I'm able to give you.
But hypothetically speaking, the results of your autopsy would be consistent with these two shots being fired.
Objection. She said she can't conclude about time between gunshots. It's not her area of expertise.
I haven't finished. Hypothetically speaking, your autopsy report is consistent with these two shots being in rapid fire.
It is consistent.
You're not, the autopsy report and the examination of the body is basically the medical evidence that you found related to the gunshot wounds.
It is.
It does not tell us the circumstances of the shooting.
It except insofar as I include history that was told to me by other people, which
Oh,
I
the-
usually mention on the first page and the last page.
Which is the-
Everything else is my autopsy findings.
Which is the altercation that we've already talked about.
Right,
It doesn't tell us the circumstances of which caused the shooting,
right.
correct? And there are two forms of deaths that you examine, natural causes and unnatural causes, correct?
You could say that, yes.
Okay. Is there a better way to say it?
Well, we usually say that the medical examiner's job is to determine the cause and manner of death in suspicious cases, unusual, unnatural, and violent. We try not to do autopsies on natural death, that's the job of the hospital. But yes, sometimes we work natural deaths, and sometimes we work unnatural deaths.
In your case summary and comment, you refer to the manner of death being homicide. You're not all referring to criminal liability, are you?
No, I don't get to decide criminal liability, and I'm grateful for that.
And you're just determining that it was an unnatural, violent death?
Violent death at the hands of another is deemed homicide, intentional violent death, as opposed to a car accident where you didn't mean to kill him.
All right.
It doesn't tell me anything about whether the person's culpable.
All right, thank you.
Can I follow up, Your Honor?
Right.
Ma'am, you just characterized homicide as an intentional violent death at the hands of another.
I did.
And I want to ask you a brief question with respect to the gunshot wound to the face. Did you mention partial paralysis as associated with that?
I said it might be, but it's hard for me to know.
Okay. I also have a question. Did you collect any evidence besides bullets from Mr. Chapman's body?
I did.
Did you collect blood from his body, in fact?
I collected blood, vitreous humor, urine, bile, fingerprints, a gunshot residue kit, the clothing, the bags from the hands, the bullets, fingernail clippings, and a fingernail clipper, and a DNA card.
And would the blood then have been submitted to the Department of Forensic Science for testing?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have occasion to examine the contents of William Chapman's stomach?
I did.
What were the contents?
It was pretty empty. Let me make sure.
What about the contents of his pockets?
The gastric pouch is nearly empty aside from traces of blood. No food, just a couple traces of blood. When I looked at his body, I think his pockets were already turned inside out, yes.
No contents inside the pockets that you observed?
No personal effects at all, no contents.
Judge, may I briefly publish the previously admitted photos to the jury? Thank you.
Judge, I'm not sure what the purpose of this is. Did not go into photos on on cross-examination, so this would be beyond the scope of the cross.
Be it that, you can post. Yeah, that's fine.
I'm going to try to go in order as best I can, Dr. Gunther. Dr. Gunther, I believe this was a photo you identified as showing the...
You can step out now.
Thank you.
Give it a point.
I believe you identified this as a photo showing the general overall appearance of Mr. Chapman to you from the torso up?
Yes, this is when his hands are still up behind his back.
Showing you this photo, which is Commonwealth's 43. What does that depict?
In this picture, we partially open the handbag so we can get the handcuffs off, and you can see stuff around it.
This photo, which is Commonwealth's 40, does that accurately depict your general impression of Mr. Chapman from the waist down?
It does.
And we had talked about some dried bloodless abrasions on Mr. Chapman's forehead. Ask you if this photo, which is Commonwealth's 46, accurately shows those.
It does. Four scrape marks. Can't tell what scrapes.
And ma'am, does this photo accurately show Mr. Chapman's face before the wound was... This photo, which is Commonwealth's 45, does this accurately show Mr. Chapman's face before it was cleaned?
Yes.
And where would the gunshot wound be in this photo?
In the left side of his nose.
Dr. Gunther, I'm now showing you another photo of a gunshot wound. Does that accurately depict, that being photo number Commonwealth Exhibit 51, does that accurately depict the chest gunshot wound?
It does. In fact, to remind you, this was the as-is photograph of what I did.
I'm showing you one more overall photo. Does this, which is Commonwealth number 50, does that, Commonwealth number 50, does that accurately show the location of both gunshots?
It does. You can see the gunshot wound in his nose, the gunshot wound in his chest, also abrasions on his forehead, and a little bit of skin slip on his eyebrow.
And that's all the questions I have for you. Thank you. Coach Rankin.
Thank you, Judge. Nothing further for this witness.
Oh, counsel.
Yes, sir.
Counsel.
No, sir.
Can the doctor be excused?
She can, Judge.
Sir.
You may be excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Next witness.
Juliana Redleaf.
I do.
May I inquire? Good afternoon, ma'am. Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Juliana Redleaf. Last name is two words. First one is R-E-D, second is L-E-A-F.
Ma'am, how are you employed today?
I am employed by the Virginia Department of Forensic Science as a firearms examiner. I work out of the lab in Norfolk.
And how long have you held that position?
10 years.
Have you ever testified as an expert in the analysis of firearms in the courts of the Commonwealth before?
Yes, I am.
How many times would you say?
I think it's about 87 times now.
Have you testified in this court, Portsmouth Circuit Court?
Judge, again, we're very familiar with Ms. Redleaf, and we would stipulate to her qualifications.
Judge, I'd offer her as an expert then in firearm analysis, gunshot residue analysis, and gunshot distance determination.
So noted, so received.
And ma'am, I want to direct your attention back to April 23rd and 27, 2015, and ask you if the Department of Forensic Science received evidence from the Virginia State Police on those two dates.
What was the date again?
April 23rd and 27th of 2015.
Yes, April 23rd, yes.
What was submitted on April 23rd?
April 23rd, there was a firearm, 2 cartridge cases, a magazine that went with the firearm, and 2 bullets submitted.
And who had submitted those items?
Those were submitted by Paul Compton.
Then redirecting you, ma'am, to April 27th, 2015, what did the DFS receive?
I received a sweatshirt and a t-shirt.
And who submitted those items?
Paul Compton.
And ma'am, pursuant to a stipulation as to the chain of custody of those items, that it's proper, they're okay. But are you aware of any chain of custody issues with these items once they were received by you?
No, I'm not.
Okay. And Judge, may I approach and retrieve some exhibits? you several items which have been entered as Commonwealth 23, or the Commonwealth 22, Commonwealth 23, and then Commonwealth 28 and 29. Ask you if your signature appears on any of these items. Or your initials.
Yeah, there's this sticker here, so it's placed on the container when it's submitted to the lab, and then above that, I write the case number, item number, my initials, and the date of when I start my examination.
And what item are you holding? Is that Commonwealth
28.
28? Does your initials appear on Commonwealth 29?
Yes.
Does your initials appear on Commonwealth 22?
Yes.
And Commonwealth 23?
Yes.
Did you examine all these items and analyze them?
Yes, I did.
And did you produce a certificate of analysis related to all these items?
Yes.
Show you a document and ask you to identify that.
This is a certificate that I prepared. It has the lab number, which was FS lab number T15-2515, and has my signature.
Does this fairly accurately document the results of your analysis of all the items pictured on here?
Yes, it does.
Judge, I would offer this as Commonwealth's next exhibit.
No objection.
No receipt.
May I approach? Now, ma'am, I want to direct your attention first to Commonwealth's Exhibit 22, the gun. Could you take that out and show that to the jury very briefly? Ma'am, what type of weapon is that?
This is a Glock Model 19, caliber 9mm pistol.
Did you perform a functionality test on that item, ma'am?
Yes.
And tell the jury briefly how you performed that test.
So when I opened the item to examine it, I just examined to make sure that it is operating condition, that the safety features are functioning properly, and then I test fire it. We have a water tank that we test fire into just to make sure that it will actually expel a cartridge as it is designed to do.
And did you find that firearm to be in mechanical operating condition?
Yes.
And I noticed that the gun was accompanied by Commonwealth 23, which is a magazine and the rounds that the magazine contained. Did you receive that item as well?
Yes.
Okay. And did you use that magazine that is Commonwealth 23 and any of its cartridges to perform your test fire, or was that with test cartridges?
For the original functionality test of the firearm, I used laboratory stock ammunition. We just had ammunition at the laboratory that we use for test firing purposes. I did use the submitted magazine to test fire to make sure that the magazine worked properly with the firearm.
And to your examination, are the cartridges that go along with the magazine in Commonwealth 23, are those projectiles designed to be expelled from a firearm by force or gunpowder?
Yes.
Okay. Now, ma'am, did you compare the cartridges that you found in the magazine, Commonwealth 23, to the firearm that was submitted?
They're the type for use, which is the examination that we perform is just to determine that the cartridges are the same caliber as the firearm, meaning they are designed to be fired in that firearm, and these were.
And does your certificate of analysis reflect the conclusion that the cartridges in the magazine were designed to be fired from the firearm?
Yes.
Okay. I want to move on from the firearm and that magazine, and I want to ask you if you had occasion to analyze the two cartridge casings that are Commonwealths 28 and 29.
Yes.
Judge, may I approach and retrieve the certificate of analysis? And ma'am, I would be correct in understanding that, well, can you see the screen first of all? Ma'am, would I be correct in understanding that the cartridge casings in Commonwealth Exhibit 28 and 29, those are reflected by items 17 and 18 up on the screen?
Can you just that so to be clear?
Yes, Judge.
If possible.
I'm not sure if that's any better, but...
Yes.
Can you just tell the jury what spear means?
Spear is just the manufacturer of the cartridge, the brand.
And 9mm, I think, is the general size of the bullet.
This is caliber, yes.
Caliber.
Dimensions of the cartridge.
And what is Luger?
Luger is just, this is the name. 9mm Luger is the caliber of the cartridge in the cartridge case. And that's, it's just a name that was, whoever, the person that designed the cartridge originally gave it that name, 9mm Luger.
Okay. You can return to your seat. Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, what analysis, if any, did you perform on the cartridge casings that are Commonwealth's 28 and 29?
I compared them to the test fires that I obtained from the firearm to see if those cartridge cases were fired in that firearm.
And what was your conclusion?
That they were fired in that firearm.
And just to restate, are all of your conclusions to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty in your certificate of analysis?
Yes.
Okay. Now, ma'am, I want to actually go back and ask you about the cartridges that were contained in Commonwealth Exhibit 23. What type of bullets were those?
In the cartridges?
Yes.
They're jacketed hollow point bullets.
Tell the jury what jacketed hollow point bullets are, please.
There's most commonly they're the full metal jacket bullets and jacketed hollow point bullets. A full metal jacket is going to be surrounded completely by a jacket. Inside is a lead core, so it's got the point to it and nose. A jacketed hollow point has hollow point at the nose, so the jacket folds in around it, but then when it's fired, it's got serrated petals basically around the nose, because where the hollow point is, so when it fires, it expands, and so it comes out like in a mushroom shape, whereas a full metal jacket doesn't have those petals, it doesn't expand, it'll just go straight through.
So a hollow point bullet expands once it impacts a target, whereas a regular jacketed bullet does not expand.
Right, it's designed to expand, yes.
Okay. And with that in mind, did you have occasion to receive bullets from an autopsy conducted in this case?
Yes.
And are those notated on your certificate of analysis?
Yes.
Were you able to determine what type of bullets that the bullets received by you from the autopsy were?
Yes, they were jacketed hollow point bullets.
Did you compare those bullets to the firearm that you had received?
Yes, I did.
And what was the result of the comparison?
The result was inconclusive, meaning I couldn't determine if they were or were not fired from that firearm.
And is that kind of to be expected after a bullet has impacted a target and is slightly mangled?
Yeah, that can have an impact on it. Also, Glock firearms have what's called polygonal rifling. It's a smoother, shallower type of rifling within the barrel. The rifling is what the manufacturer places in the barrel that imparts a spin on the bullet to, as it leaves the muzzle of the firearm to give it accuracy. And so those are the markings that are placed on the bullet from the firearm that we use for identification purposes or microscopic markings. Polygonal rifling is a little bit smoother, as I said, and sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to identify. The other type of rifling is conventional cut rifling, and it's a little bit more pronounced. So it's not uncommon that it's difficult to identify bullets fired from a Glock firearm.
So while it's inconclusive, are you able to exclude those bullets from the autopsy as having been fired by that gun?
No.
Okay. I want to move on from the firearm-related evidence and ask you if you had a chance to examine some clothing in this case.
Yes.
And did you document all of your examination of the clothing in your certificate of analysis?
Yes, I did.
What pieces of clothing did you receive?
I received a sweatshirt and a t-shirt.
Judge, may I approach? I'm going to show you two items, which are the t-shirt Commonwealth 32 and the sweatshirt Commonwealth 33. Ask you if you can recognize these and have you ever examined them. You don't have to take them out of the bag.
Same thing as before, it has my mark of identification on the container, which is the lab number, item number, my initials, and the date. And they are all still sealed with my initials.
Same case for number 33?
Yes.
That?
Yes.
Just may I put a quick fire up there? Now, ma'am, the T-shirt, which is Commonwealth's Exhibit 32, did you test that for gunshot residue?
I did examine it and determined that it was, the hole in the T-shirt corresponded with the hole that was in the sweatshirt, which is consistent with the T-shirt having been an undergarment, meaning it was being worn under the sweatshirt at the time of the shooting. So I didn't do any further analysis for gunshot residues on that item.
Okay. And could you briefly tell the jury how a gun leaves a pattern of residues on clothing when it's fired?
Yes. So as the bullet exits the barrel of the firearm, there's a cloud of residues that's behind it from the ignition of the cartridge. And that kind of follows the bullet in a cone shape, and eventually it will fall off once it loses velocity, but it will travel a certain distance. So it's going to start narrow, and it's going to spread out, and it's going to get wider and less dense as it travels.
Okay. With that explanation of how the gun leaves residues on clothing in mind, I want to direct you to your analysis of the sweatshirt. Do you recall doing that analysis?
Yes.
Okay. And if I understand correctly, you found multiple holes in the sweatshirt, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, where did you find holes in the sweatshirt?
There's a hole in the left chest area, and then there were two holes in the left side of the hood. It was a hooded sweatshirt.
Did you perform testing on the holes in the hood?
I did, yes.
And did you find any residue indicating that a bullet had passed through that hole?
No, I did not.
Did you perform testing on the hole in the chest area of the sweatshirt?
Yes.
Tell the jury the test that you performed on that hole.
I visually examined them first, and then microscopically examined them as well to look for any possible powder particles. And then I also performed chemical tests, and those tests for nitrites as well as lead residues, which are both residues that are consistent with gunshot residues. And it's a chemical test, it's a color changing test, and when I spray the chemicals on, I look for a change in color to indicate any residues that would be consistent with gunshot residues.
And in the hole in the chest area, did you find any lead residues?
I found lead residues around the perimeter of the hole, which is consistent with the passage of a bullet. As a bullet passes through fabric, it usually leaves lead residues because it's kind of wiping through. So I did find those residues. I did not find any gunshot residues, like I explained with the cone. I didn't see any residues that were consistent with like powder residues or anything else.
So there was no, did you perform both the visual microscopic examination as well as the chemical test for residue around the hole in the chest area?
Yes.
And both of those tests revealed no gunshot residue?
Right, no gunshot, it's just the lead bullet wipe, which is consistent with the passage of the bullet.
Judge, may I push limits?
No, correct. You need to well.
Yes, please. findings with regard to the T-shirt. Does this T-shirt appear to be the same one you examined?
Yes.
Can you point to the hole that you examined for the jury?
Right here.
Okay. And because you determined this shirt to have likely been an undershirt, you did not find any gunshot residue around that hole?
No, which I wouldn't expect to, because the gunshot residues are going to impact whatever they hit first. But so if the sweatshirt was on the outside, they're going to hit the sweatshirt, but they're not going to hit the T-shirt underneath.
Put that back in the middle. Put the other hand back.
Because I'm going to use this for the court marks.
Okay.
Is this the sweatshirt you examined?
Yes.
Let's talk first about the holes in the hood. Can you point to those, please?
Two little holes right here. And these I was not able to determine if they were consistent with the passage of a bullet. So they could be from something else.
Did you find any lead residue on those holes?
No.
Directing you then to the hole in the chest. Can you direct the jury to where that hole is?
Right here, in this 8.
And were you able to find any gunshot residue around that hole either?
Just what I call lead white, which means consistent with the passage of a bullet. But no other residues turned up during the chemical testing or during my microscope examination that are consistent with gunshot residues.
What's the reason that no gunshot residues were found here? If you can opine on that.
There are numerous reasons, numerous factors. One of the main ones is the condition of the sweatshirt. The amount of blood and biological matter can have an impact on it. However it was handled after the situation, if it was, touched, if there was any interaction with the sweatshirt that could remove the residues. There are lots of things that can affect it. There are intervening objects. When the shot was fired, the residues would be on that as opposed to the sweatshirt.
I noticed that inside of each of these items, Commonwealth's 32, the T-shirt, and Commonwealth's 33, the sweatshirt, there are some cards containing what looks like white cardboard. Tell the jury what's in these items.
These are the patterns that I produced during my testing. So the chemical testing that's done requires test patterns. It's like a lift to show the lead residues. And this is for my Grice test, which is for the nitrite residues. So these are the patterns that were produced. As you can see, I didn't develop any residues.
Which item is this from?
This is from the T-shirt.
From the T-shirt, okay. And these items, where are they from?
These are from the sweatshirt.
Okay.
So I processed both of them. These were my patterns for processing the holes in both the hood and the chest area.
So the items with the orange substance are solely for your chemical testing to see if there's lead residue on the holes in both the t-shirt and the sweatshirt?
Yes, and this was actually just my test standard to make sure that the fabric would react as appropriate. This behind it is, this was the hole and this was the area that I processed around it.
Okay. And this item right here in the hand, it appears to be some fabric in that as well? Tell me
Yes.
what that is, please.
When I did fire test patterns with the firearm just to determine what the pattern of residues would look like with that firearm. And when I did that, one of our procedures is to use a piece of the questioned garment to test fire a test pattern into that will produce the most similar results. And so that's what this was. This was a test pattern that I shot with the firearm using the sweatshirt and then the patterns produced from it. You can see there's a piece of sweatshirt in here.
So you took a piece from Commonwealth 33 and fired the gun into it to determine what the firearm would do in terms of displaying gunshot residue on the gun, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And that brings me to my next portion of questions.
To perform those test patterns, well, what's the intent of doing the test patterns?
The test patterns are for me to evaluate what kind of residues the firearm produces in order to compare it to the garments that I'm testing for the question hole.
So you already mentioned you used the firearm that was submitted to you that you've already identified. What did you use for ammunition?
I used the cartridges that were submitted with the firearm.
Would that have been Commonwealth Exhibit 23, the magazine with hollow point bullets?
Yes.
Okay. And how many test patterns did you produce in this case?
I believe there were 6.
6, okay. Are those test patterns all reflected in your certificate of analysis?
Yes.
Were the 6 test patterns from different distances?
Yeah, not all different distances. I did duplicate a few distances just to check for consistency, but I shot patterns at 12 inches, 24 inches, 36 inches, and 48 inches.
And so were you just trying to see what pattern of residues formed at those different distances?
Yes.
When you created a test pattern from 12 inches, did you observe a pattern of gunshot residues?
Yes, I did.
When you fired the gun 24 inches from your test pattern, did you observe a pattern of residues?
Yes.
What about at 36 inches?
At 36 inches, it wasn't a pattern anymore. We consider a pattern something that's very reproducible. So it has to be dense enough for me to shoot the same pattern again and see something very similar. Once it starts to get sparse, I don't consider it a pattern anymore. And so at 36 inches, it wasn't a pattern anymore. It was just sparse particles.
Okay. Did you create a test pattern at 48 inches from the muzzle of the gun to the test pattern material?
Yes.
And did you observe any residues at all during that test?
Just a few particles, but no pattern.
Okay. And, ma'am, I want to draw your attention back to the sweatshirt.
Mm-hmm.
If that item did not have excessive biological material on it, like you mentioned, would you expect to see a pattern of residues if a gunshot had occurred 4 feet or closer?
Possibly. Definitely at 12 and 24 inches. Like I said, at 36 inches it started to fall off, so there wasn't much of a pattern. So I'm not sure if I would have seen that or not. At 48 inches, probably not.
Does your testing take into account the presence of outside factors like wind?
It doesn't. We do this all inside. I don't know that wind would have an impact on it, but there are environmental factors that we can't account for.
And are you able to make any conclusions about the distance from the muzzle of a gun to the target, say if a shot is shown to be taken from 10 feet away?
I wouldn't expect to see any residues at 10 feet. Usually they fall off somewhere between 4 to 5 feet in my experience with the handgun, so I wouldn't expect to see anything at 10 feet.
Thank you, ma'am. That's all the questions I have for you. The defense or the court may have some questions. Yes, sir. May I first approach with Commonwealth's 52? Yes, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, ma'am. With respect to the weapon that you examined, which you determined to be a Glock model 19 caliber 9mm Luger pistol, you know that to be a standard issued police weapon.
Yes.
Right. Nothing unusual about that.
No.
With respect to the bullets that you were provided as a result of the autopsy that was conducted, you determined them to be a particular 9mm hollow point, correct?
Yes.
Again, standard police issued ammunition.
Yes.
Nothing unusual or about that.
No, nothing unusual.
The sweatshirt that you examined, and I'm just going to try and boil it down into very simple, straightforward questions to you, okay? The sweatshirt that you examined, you found no patterns of residue on the sweatshirt.
That's correct.
And you were unable to find patterns of residue on the sweatshirt because of the excessive biological material, number one.
Yes.
And number two, because it was on the edge of that 87 number that we saw on the sweatshirt, correct?
That's correct.
So you are not able to tell us, because of those two variables, whether this gun was 12, 24, 36, 48. I could go on, couldn't I?
That's correct.
And,
Yes.
and you really can't tell us anything about the distance of the muzzle to the sweatshirt because of those factors.
Right. Due to it to say anything about the distance of how far the muzzle of the firearm was from that sweatshirt at the time of firing.
So even though you test fired the weapon by using the same cartridges and the same magazine and the same bullets, and that test resulted in certain patterns that you did find, it really doesn't mean anything because we can't tell anything from the sweatshirt because of the blood and the number.
Correct. The patterns, yeah. It's a part of our procedure to test fire patterns with the firearm for comparison purposes, but I really had nothing to compare it to. So I know what the firearm produces, but I have no idea. I can't relate that to the sweatshirt and what that would mean.
So try as hard as you can and to perform every test that you possibly can, and as scientific as the Department of Forensic Sciences are and as good as you are, still really doesn't come up with anything, does it?
No.
All right, thank you.
No other questions, Judge. Thank you.
Can she be excused?
She may, Your Honor, yes.
Counsel,
Yes, Your Honor.
you may be excused.
Thank you.
All right, counsel, y'all come up here. Members of the jury, you've been seated here almost 2 hours this morning. I'm going to take a short recess before the compliments witness, okay? Now to the jury room, get you some water, coffee, rest of the day, okay? I just tell her I'm still in the courtroom, so she don't talk. Remember when you call them, so talk, please, talk. That's it. Take a recess. All rise. Court will be taking a short recess.